Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of B Movie Theater. And this will be a very special Halloween edition. Yes, I will be joined, of course, by my fellow B movie enthusiast F.W. Waller, and we will be talking about not only the history, but a couple of interesting facts about the original John Carpenter Halloween movie.
Hello, everyone.
And where to actually begin? I guess get out of the way the remakes and like all the various differences that it had to
Well,
the original, or rather the not so complimentary like stuff that Rob Zombie had put in there.
well, I think I can actually sort of get this whole video started by saying maybe talking about the actual history that sort of led up to Halloween's release.
Yeah, that actually would make more sense.
Yeah, but yeah, Halloween, the original Carpenter version came out in 1978, which, of course, uh, it seemed as if like the 70s was a very pivotal decade for the entire horror movie genre because in the 70s, uh, there were all kinds of horror movies that were becoming a lot more appreciated and more recognized by a wider, more diverse audience of people. In the, for example, in the 1940s through the 50s, horror movies were generally viewed as being sort of trashy, double feature B-movie drive-in entertainments, not to be taken all that seriously. But in 1969, when Roman Polanski directed a little-known movie called Rosemary's Baby, which was actually nominated for several Oscar awards, that's sort of when the horror movie genre sort of began to grow up a little bit. And of course, um, and of course, during the early 70s, you had a few movies that really pushed the boundaries of what was visually acceptable as far as subject matter. I mean,
Caught. Ah, I kind of messed up. I was gonna do like the fake cough and then say Psycho.
but Psycho came out in like 1960, though. Interesting.
Ah, that.
It's interesting that you bring up Psycho, but I'll get to that. But yeah, in the early 1970s, a few horror movies came out that really pushed the boundaries of what was sort of acceptable to see in movies as far as subject matter concerning like sex, drugs, and violence and all that stuff. And you know, in 1971, Stanley Kubrick made A Clockwork Orange, which, while it wasn't really what you would call a horror movie, it was pretty damn graphic and gratuitous and violent and disturbing for its time. So much so that it received an X rating upon its initial release, and a crap load of other movies would come out following in its footsteps as far as being graphic and disturbing. Uh, one of which, you know, I could name off a dozen movies. Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left, which was his first movie, by the way.
Tom Hardy's Bronson, or the movie Bronson that Tom Hardy put in there, that was like really kind of out there.
Yeah, but that's like, yeah, but
Well, yeah, granted, it is a more recent movie, but there have been many movies like that that are. Let's see, Last House on the Left, Bronson. What else was inspired by Clockwork Orange?
freaking, uh, you could, maybe you could probably say, Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects.
Yeah, that's definitely another one.
Right, but basically in the early 70s, one slasher movie that sort of gave rise to a popular franchise that preceded Halloween but sort of helped to lay the groundwork that Halloween would follow is, of course, you know, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper. That, well, that movie was sort of very similar to Halloween in the fact that it created an incredibly popular sort of slasher franchise, but it's also similar to Halloween in the fact that there was virtually no gore in it. Like, there was very little actual blood that was in the movie. Uh, a lot of the death scenes, a lot of the killing and the death scenes were very suggestive, and it relied mostly on, like, suspense and atmosphere.
And
However,
that,
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
no, I was gonna say, and that's a technique that John Carpenter, as a director, really used.
Yeah,
and and he used that greatly to his advantage. He used it in like movies, not only with like Halloween, but he used it in other movies like The Fog, a couple of parts of The Thing, and that's one of the many reasons that I think John Carpenter, especially in this modern era of movie making, is really a filmmaker that I think people need to study his techniques and really use, because a lot of modern day horror movies, they tend to rely on the gore factor rather than actually building suspense to the actual kill itself.
yeah, the brand new 2011 prequel of The Thing is a perfect example of this.
When you watch the, I guess you can say, the John Carpenter remake of The Thing, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's grotesque and gory, but it was just the fact of, like, just all the random shit happening. Like, one guy has a cardiac arrest, next thing you know, boom, guy gets his fucking hands eaten
Yeah,
off.
it was the tension. It was the tension and just the suspense and the whole feeling you had of, oh shit, what the fuck's gonna happen next?
Or like, when they were testing the blood and that one guy's head opened up like a Venus flytrap and everybody's like tied to chairs.
Yeah, and they're like, oh god, torch him, he's gonna kill us all. And that's what made that movie so damn creepy. And before actually directing Halloween, John Carpenter had he made a couple movies before he did Halloween. His first movie that he ever did was a sci-fi comedy called Dark Star, and then the movie he did after that is a classic action movie called Assault on Precinct 13.
I was about ready to say that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great movie for all of you action movie fans out there.
I definitely need to watch the original because a lot of people said that the remake was not all that great.
Yeah, the original really is a masterpiece. If you get
And
a chance
and
to
an
check it out.
interesting little note for those of you who, like me and Ian, are John Carpenter fans. When he made Halloween, it was technically considered an independent movie, at this particular era in the 70s, much like many other like 70s movies. It was a highly independent movie, and John Carpenter, what's interesting is that he didn't just direct it, but he also co-wrote it with Debbie Hill, and he also produced the movie, and he even did the musical score as well. So he was all over the place. He was directing it, writing it, producing it,
Yeah,
and even scoring it.
yeah. John Carpenter actually did the music for a lot of his own movies. In fact, I think the only movie I can think of right now where Carpenter didn't do the music for was The Thing, which was composed by Ennio Morricone, who you all may know better as the composer of Sergio Leone's famous Dollars trilogy. The whole bow, 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 that whole
Yeah,
thing.
and of course with Halloween, and one interesting fact about Halloween, and this is one that not a lot of horror movie fans really actually understand about this first original movie, is that this was actually the film debut for Jamie Lee Curtis. Not a lot of people
Yeah,
actually know this, surprisingly.
yep, yeah. Well, I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis is like one of many very well-known Hollywood actors and actresses that began in horror movies. I mean, you can look at a whole bunch of other actresses. I mean, Jennifer Aniston, her first movie ever was Leprechaun. Friggin' Johnny Depp, his first movie was the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Kevin Bacon, the first movie he was ever in was Friday the 13th. Where he had an arrow stuck through his neck. Right to
Uh,
the bed mattress. You know, lots, and I mean lots of like movie directors and actors and actresses started out in the horror genre at some point.
Yeah, and that's always, I think, very kind of interesting if you brought that up to them. However, one interesting thing that I found very interesting about this is that Carpenter, rather than using an actual town, he made up a fictional Midwestern town for this movie.
Haddonfield, Illinois.
Yeah, and one thing that Rob Zombie's like remake did is that it explained kind of the psychosis of why Michael Myers was very twisted, which that was good for what it was, but I always liked the original simply because I mean the guy just at like 6 years old he murders his older sister and we don't get a reason why.
Yeah,
He
well,
just he
to be perfectly honest, though, in the explanation in Rob Zombie's version, I just kind of felt it killed a lot of the mystery and suspense surrounding Michael's character because, okay, we find out the reason why he becomes a psychopath is because he had a rough childhood. It's like, wow, really? That's the reason why he turns into a serial killer, and nonetheless, not only a serial killer, but Michael Myers, like one of the most notorious serial killers ever. That's kind of lame because, if that's all it takes for somebody to become a notorious killer like that, then I should be fucking Ed Gein or something.
I should be Jason Voorhees then.
Yeah, it's like,
Come to
oh,
think of it, that explains why I like putting on the hockey mask a lot.
yeah, it's like
Anyway,
we don't we didn't really need to have that all laid out for us. That just killed a lot of the suspense. It's like, yeah, it's just like in the producer's cut of Halloween 6 when we figure out that Michael Myers is being manipulated by an evil cult. It's like, come on, that sucks. We don't want to know why he's out killing people. All we need to know is that he's become unstoppable somehow, and that he needs to be stopped, and he murdered his sister at a young age. That's all we need to know.
like pretty much basically as you describe Michael Myers best, it's like in the first film he was mortal. All the films after that he just became the personification of evil, pretty much.
Yeah, it's like what Donald Pleasance says, and talking to that one police officer, he's like, I looked into his eyes and I saw something truly evil. He had the darkest and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. That's all the exposition we ever needed on Michael Myers' backstory.
And an interesting fact is that Halloween was produced on a budget of 2,300 or like 23 or like 325 million. I'm not exactly good at math here.
That's a huge budget. Halloween was actually had a tiny budget.
It did. Well, I'm looking at this because it's like 325 and that's like comma like three zeros.
I think I think it was actually produced for like maybe you're maybe
However,
of maybe
however,
325,000.
yeah, I think that's what it actually reads. Sorry guys if we're like all over the place. We're trying to get all these interesting facts and like stuff out of the way about the movie.
Hang on.
We're trying to give you guys factoids, little stuff that you can tell your friends.
Yeah, 325,000 was.
Yeah, and it grossed 47 million at the box office here in the U.S. and 60 million overseas. It made the equivalent of what, as they said,
Yeah, 60 million worldwide.
as like 203 million as of 2010.
Yeah.
However, it was talked about as one of the most profitable independent movies ever, and many actually cite this movie as the first in a long line of slasher films that were actually inspired by Hitchcock's Psycho.
Yeah.
However, what's
Also,
interesting is that it...
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. I actually had another little interesting fact to lay out, but
Ah,
yeah, but it's also interesting to note that that John Carpenter was not only influenced by Psycho, but he was influenced by another sort of slasher precursor movie that came out.
Alright, yay! Sorry about that, guys. Apparently a whole bunch of random shit happened. Apparently Ian and I just had a poltergeist moment.
Yeah, I was. I'm saying this for like the third time now, but yeah, when I was cut off there, I was actually talking about the 1974 movie Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark, and I was talking about how that movie actually influenced John Carpenter a whole lot for the beginning of Halloween, because most of you may remember the beginning of Halloween. Um, you actually see through Michael Myers' eyes as he wanders throughout the house, and he puts on a little mask, and you actually see him through his eyes. Of course, you see him stab his own sister, and it sort of ends, and the whole POV shot just sort of ends when Michael just walks outside, uh, and he's unmasked by his parents, and he's surrounded by all the cops. Uh, that that opening sequence was very much influenced by Black Christmas, in the fact that in Black Christmas, whenever there was a scene of a person getting killed or murdered, you actually saw through the killer's eyes through a POV shot. And Bob Clark himself even acknowledged the fact that Carpenter called him up on the phone and asked him, "Hey, I want to know how you did all those shots in Black Christmas where you look through the killer's eyes, because I think that would be really cool to see in my own movie." But yeah, that's all I have to say on that little
And
issue.
and apparently this was something that I read to you actually off camera many moments ago. But apparently in 2006, John Carpenter's Halloween, the original here that we're talking about briefly here, was actually selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, stating that it was culturally, historically, and I'm gonna mess this word up, and aesthetically significant. There we go. Basically, in other words, the movie was important enough that it's going to basically be protected by the Library of Congress, or at least the original reel will.
Yeah, that's always good, because it is definitely a horror movie classic in the sense that the thing that sort of made Halloween such a huge, impactful movie when it originally came out. Well, for one thing, during the 70s, there were a lot of really hard-hitting horror movies that came out. I mean, in 1973, you had William Friedkin's The Exorcist, the whole "your mother sucks cocks in hell," that whole deal. And then in 1975, of course, Steven Spielberg released Jaws, which, of course, that really needs no introduction. In 1977, Dario Argento directed Suspiria, which was the movie that sort of made Italian horror movies popular. And of course, in '78, John Carpenter released Halloween. And of course, a year later, Ridley Scott released Aliens. So it's like, yeah, the '70s was a cornerstone for like the whole horror movie genre, in the fact that so many movies came out during that decade that would make horror movies big and popular, and most of all, profitable.
And I think what's interesting, because I'm reading the production deal here on Wikipedia, apparently seeing Assault on Precinct 13 at the Milan Film Festival, independent film producer Erwin Yablans, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name, and financer Mustafa Akkad. I can't. I'm sure
Yeah,
I just completely butchered those names.
yeah, it was Irwin Yablans.
apparently they sought him out to direct a film about a psychopathic killer stalking babysitters, which that's pretty much what Halloween's premise is. It was based on the premise that, Michael Myers is this killer that's stalking babysitters. However, they wanted to do it with the same impact as The Exorcist, at least according to a magazine interview. However, Carpenter and his then girlfriend, you know, Deborah Hill, they had drafted the story and that it was originally going to be called The Babysitter Murders, but Carpenter told Entertainment Weekly many years later, or even Entertainment Weekly during that time, that it was suggested that the movie be set on Halloween night and that the name Halloween would be much more profitable for movie theaters.
Yeah. And on top of that, it's also interesting to note that the reason why Donald Pleasance, the main reason why Donald Pleasance was actually starred in the movie in the first place is because that his daughters, his two daughters, were actually massive fans of Assault on Precinct 13, and that's what basically landed him a role in a Carpenter movie. And I don't know what would actually. I can only imagine the reason why he kept coming back to star in all the other Halloween movies apart from Part 3 was only because the producers just shoveled a crapload of money his way for every time he starred in as Dr. Sam Loomis. But that's also another interesting thing to note is that Dr. Sam Loomis, which is Pleasance's character, is actually named after a psychiatrist character in the original Psycho. And while we're on the topic of Psycho, it's also interesting to note that Jamie Lee Curtis is in fact the daughter of Janet Leigh, the female star of the original Psycho that gets murdered in the shower by Norman Bates.
However, something interesting that you told me about that I didn't know, and I'm actually looking at it, and it's funny. Apparently, they bought for $1.98 a Captain Kirk mask, and that pretty much Tommy Lee Wallace, the production designer and art director and location scout plus co-editor of the movie, he created Michael Myers' signature mask by, of course, getting a Captain Kirk mask, and then he basically widened the eye holes and spray painted the flesh part of it like a bluish white. And that's pretty much, they were pretty much, working on a very tight, limited budget, and that a lot of stuff was made on hand or from stuff that was purchased inexpensively, like all independent, low-budget movies are.
Yeah, but you have to admit that that's pretty astonishing that they managed to take such a cheap sort of object and actually make it an iconic horror movie motif, which is of course Michael Myers' mask.
And apparently I'm looking at this and I'm laughing too. Apparently many of the actors wore their own clothes, and that apparently Jamie Lee Curtis's wardrobe was purchased at JCPenney's for only $100. I have no idea why I'm telling this fact, but it just seems funny to me, so let's go with it.
Yep. And also, Michael Myers was actually in the original Halloween movie alone. Michael Myers was actually played by several different people. I think he was played by 8 different people in the first movie alone, which is pretty crazy. I know the name of one of the guys who played Michael Myers was Nick Castle, who was actually a person that helped Carpenter write the script. And he sort of helped Carpenter produce the movie as well. All the other people, I can't really remember their names. I can't even remember the name of the guy who actually played Michael Myers when he got his mask knocked off in the final scene of the first movie, which is, it's pretty sad, but...
And an interesting thing to note is that Halloween was actually filmed in 21 days.
Yes. Less than a month.
Yeah,
Then again,
yeah.
but then again, the original Rocky was actually filmed in only in a couple of months.
But I mean, it's just it's one of those like funny. It's just one of those like really kind of like funny things that you think about. And a little interesting fact about the Halloween movie series, guys, is that apparently there have been in a total, at least allegedly now, they're up to 10 Halloween movies in general. And an interesting fact is that there have been only 8 directors for these 10 movies, and that only 2 directors have ever really done sequels or other versions of a Halloween movie. Rob Zombie, of course, being the most obvious, but the other one was, how did I pronounce his name? Rick something or other?
Rick, hang on. Uh, I'm not really. Was he the guy that directed like the Revenge of Michael Myers and the Curse of Michael Myers? I believe.
Um, he actually was the guy who directed Halloween 2 and Halloween Resurrection. So
Uh,
yeah, so yeah, think about that, guys. 10 films, 8 directors, and only 2 of them have actually done sequels.
oh yeah, I remember. It was Rick Rosenthal. And
Ah.
also another interesting thing to note is that Halloween 2 actually takes place within the exact same night as the first Halloween movie, because the original Halloween ends on a cliffhanger because basically Michael Myers he's supposedly killed by Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, and she tells the kids to like go get the police, and she's just sitting there resting, and then Michael Myers just gets back up and he goes to kill her, but then Dr. Loomis breaks into the house just in time, and he shoots Michael, and he falls off the balcony of the house, supposedly dies, and then when they look back at the spot where he fell to, he's gone, which the second movie picks up pretty much literally at that exact moment, and that's also the movie where they apparently killed Michael Myers, but we all know that that's not what really happened. Well, I mean, as far as the continuity goes, I mean, at the end of the second movie, they destroy Michael Myers, like, completely, because, like, there's just a bomb that goes off in this part of in a certain part of the hospital. Dr. Loomis gets killed. Laurie Strode is still alive, though, but Michael, he just gets burned to a cinder. Like, he's literally set on fire, even inside of his own mask. Like, you just see his mask melting off. Like, he's just completely incinerated by the explosion. And, like, come on, that's deader than dead. There's no way he would be able to come back after that. Steve?
Yes.
Yeah. Also, one thing that the second movie kind of did that the original movie didn't do, and it was sort of something that pretty much all the other Halloween movies would sort of do, is of course they brought in lots and lots of gore, which one of the things that sort of helped out the original movie, the original Halloween, was that despite the fact that, you know, it had an R rating, there was really there was no blood in the movie at all.
The only like real shocking scene, if you will, is just that guy being impaled with a kitchen knife to the wall.
Yeah, that was probably the most violent scene in the movie. Other than that, the movie was really tame, and so a lot of the deaths were very much sort of implied, and that actually sort of helped Carpenter a lot, because it sort of helped that a lot of the suspense and a lot of the deaths were very much implied, and they kind of left it all up to your imagination. And also, the finale of Halloween is something that would be imitated in a dozen horror movies, where the main female character is running throughout basically all of the sets, the entire neighborhood, and she sees all of the dead bodies just littered around, and she sees pretty much You're recording now?
Yes.
Alright. Basically, what I said was that the finale of Halloween, basically we see Laurie Strode sort of running around in the neighborhood trying to find help when she realizes that, her parents are dead, all of her friends are dead. She basically sees all of Michael Myers' handiwork littered across the whole neighborhood, sort of put on display, if you will. And, this would be something that would be imitated in countless slasher horror movies, most notably the Friday the 13th movies, where, you see sort of like a huge display of all the killers, of all the corpses and dead bodies that the killer has left laying around.
I think I think two other movies that did this, at least in like the 90s or so, was I Know What You Did Last Summer and the Scream movies, I believe.
Yeah, the Scream movies, yeah, very most notably. And yeah, that's really the biggest genre that Halloween had the biggest influence on, was the slasher genre. The whole idea of, teenagers doing all kinds of naughty things, having premarital sex and doing a lot of drugs and, drinking a lot of beer and alcohol and whatnot.
And this would lead to probably the horror movie stereotype that the virgin is the character that's going to live, while everybody else
Yeah,
that's like snorting coke and getting butt naked and stuff are all apparently going to die, and
yeah,
that's become like a trend in horror movies that's just laughable. Like that, and I think that's half the fun of watching a horror movie, is just you see the characters, it's like, well, now they're gonna die.
yeah.
It's just,
And this is the movie that sort of established and created all of those popular cliches, if you will.
yeah. Or like, don't pick up the phone, all these other like archetypes that we see in horror movies.
Yeah,
Like I think probably the funniest death in Halloween is that one girl being strangled by the phone cord.
yeah,
Like that, like. However, of course, now that we're in the new section of horror movies, we'll get to see the remake of Michael Myers doing the exact same scene, but wait, it'll be cordless. How do I know this? Because the teenagers are just that dumb in horror movies.
yep, yep. They're all pretty much.
I wish you people could have seen my face that I made just now. It was kind of funny. Yeah, and I think Michael Myers established something that Jason Voorhees copied off of him, which is the really slow, confident walk and somehow magically skipping 20 frames ahead and managing to catch somebody and kill them.
Yeah,
It's like the running gag, Ian, of what the hell does the killer do? They're walking 1 minute, the next minute they're halfway on the other side of the road. It's like, how'd they get there? It's like, did they fly on a pterodactyl? Did they hijack like a little
yeah.
girl's
Did they
scooter?
teleport? Like,
Exactly. It's like, how the
like,
hell did they get to that other side of the road?
yeah. I mean, are they like Nightcrawler or something? Do they just have the magical ability to teleport? Like, how the
It's like
fuck?
that. It's like that's the one horror movie cliche that nobody ever explains. They just have the innate ability to do that. Especially Jason Voorhees. He's notorious for that.
Yeah,
I
but then
swear, I swear to you, I think Jason Voorhees has like a magical taxi cab that just like runs him through like every scene, then like drops him off at the other side.
yeah, and